Hi strangers, if you're like me, you've had Despacito stuck in your head for a freaking month now because you can definitely tell what songs are playing in reception photos. Or you're a photographer who wants to talk about outsourcing editing. If that sounds like you, we should talk. So, okay, it's that time of year where I have been sending out, I'm sorry, my next available weekend isn't until November emails for like 2 months now. I'm overwhelmed. I have 68,391 photos in my editing queue right now. So let's talk about outsourcing. I got a ton of questions, which was really super helpful, but it also meant that I ended up writing a novel, which I now get to read for you. So I want to start by just talking through why I've decided to outsource that aspect of my business. And it's because I do a lot of time tracking, and I realized that I was spending about 5 hours editing a wedding. That's 5 hours, not including all of like the breaks and stuff. That's consistent editing time. I know from, again, time tracking that I only really get 4 productive hours of editing and culling a day. I can only do about 7 hours of actual work in a day, which includes like an hour of emailing and maybe 2 hours of administrative work. And that's not including if I had an engagement shoot and the amount of time it takes for me to like travel to and from places. There's no conceivable way that I can edit a full wedding in one day if I'm trying to have a balanced workload. And I will say, here's the thing about outsourcing. It is really scary to put the reins in somebody else's hands when it comes to creativity in your business. Here's the other thing about outsourcing. That's not really what's happening when you're outsourcing your editing. Your photos don't go straight from the editor to your client without you seeing them. So what you're really doing is you're having somebody help correct your white balance and exposure a little bit more so that you can spend less time tweaking things before sending off to your client. You get the final say in everything that you do, but somebody is helping along the way. And knowing how long it takes for me to edit a full wedding, I really appreciate the fact that my editors can get me like 3 clicks away from perfection. So editing a wedding basically goes from 5 hours to like 45 minutes for me. I will say that I only outsource my weddings. Every family shoot, every engagement shoot, every maternity shoot, elopements, any situation where it's like a more controlled lighting situation, I'm still gonna edit myself because it just doesn't take me that much time. I got a lot of questions for people that were just like, I don't know anything about the process. Where do I start? What do I do? And I am happy to tell you that the basics for most editing companies are kind of the same. I've had a meaningful editing relationship with just 3 companies. I've used Shoot.edit, RDFL, which is the Raw Photo Digital Film Lab, and Plus Minus Collective. They all have sort of a similar setup with how they receive images. First, you send them any special camera calibration profile that you're using with your preset. So if you're using Develop, if you're using Mastin, any of those, you want to make sure that you're sending those off to your editors so that everybody's on the same page with what they're seeing. You want to build smart previews, export the images as a catalog, zip the files together, and then you submit those to your editor. And then each company is different. Some charge by the photos, some charge within a certain range of a number of photos. Some of them are subscription based, so you would just have to find a company and see which one works best for you. Most companies do offer some form of culling. That's something that I would have a really hard time giving up just because 90% of what we do is curation. We decide which moments to take, when to take them, which photos to deliver. You can completely change the story of a day and the look of your portfolio just by choosing different images. That issue aside, I also don't understand the logistics of how you would cull images back in and out. I think that would just make my brain explode. So I won't outsource culling, although you can probably get it done if that's something that you wanted to do. I also overshoot. So the way that the wedding day ends up looking for me is mostly the culling that I put into it. The most difficult part of outsourcing is really just getting on the same page as your editor so that you can start getting really consistent results with the work that you're giving them and what they're giving back to you. I have been working with Plus Minus Collective since late 2016, so I'm really comfortable with using them as a company. And I love working with them so much that I asked Jack, my editor, if he could give some feedback that he would like photographers to know going into outsourcing. And he definitely stepped up to the plate. He had a lot of really great information, and it's kind of long, but I just want to read it because I thought it was great. Jack says, it might not be absolutely perfect the first time. A couple of times we've been, frankly, abused via email for the results of a first job when there was very little to work off of and we were creating a starting point to build from. We are humans too with feelings, and I remember at the time just how hurt we felt as a team. We bent over backwards in both the client interactions and the effort we put in. We also do our best each time, and if there is anything that needs fixing, we will do it. It will take a little bit of back and forth, and you get back what you put in. Giving good examples and discussing what you do like and what you don't in regards of editing really helps to build that style guide, and the results look better from the get-go. He also wanted to point out that not every outsourcing business is the same. Some models are built around being cheap as chips, giving you results in the quickest way possible, and others, like Plus Minus Collective, will take their time to get to know you, our style, and then build a working relationship. Do not start outsourcing if you cannot spare the time to get set up. This is really important. We are wedding photographers ourselves, they are, and we know how it feels when you're behind on edits, deadlines, or have a busy life and schedule. We find those that outsource when they are really behind don't really put in the time to give us all the relevant information, samples, or discuss editing style. This means we are doing our best with the information that we have, and often the results aren't right on point the first time. This can be stressful for both us and the client and can lead to a soured experience. We are here to help. It honestly takes about 15 minutes. From there, we can quickly get up to speed and start getting through that back catalog. Just give us a chance to do it right from the start. So this really wasn't meant to be like an advertising for Plus Minus, but you can see that he's provided a lot of information that maybe we didn't think about. I can very easily imagine the conversations coming from like passive aggressive, stressed out photographers whenever they get a job back that isn't necessarily exactly what they had in mind. I can tell just in the questions that were submitted that people were really frustrated by their outsourcing process. And I get it. So I want to compare everything that Jack just said with my experience of working with Shoot.edit. So instead of getting to know my style, they had like these charts where you chose how much contrast and what color skin tones, which I always thought was weird because it was like one or two brides and they all just had like various different color skin tones. It wasn't personalized. It was sort of like, this is going to be your correct white balance. This is going to be your correct exposure. And I would have an image that in my mind would obviously be a silhouette that they would like correctly expose. They just didn't get me. Customer service-wise, Shoot.edit was really responsive, but I tended to get inconsistent results. RDFL I worked with for 9 months, and they had amazing customer service. I really enjoyed working with them, but I also felt like we weren't on the same page all the time with editing, and it was a little bit more than I wanted to spend per wedding, and that's how I ended up working with Plus Minus Collective. You can tell just by Jack's response and letting me like put so many quotes in this Patreon post that he's a really responsive guy. At this point, we've been working together for 2 years, and I feel like he gets my editing pretty well, and I really appreciate that. But it wasn't like that in the beginning, and we had to work to get to that place. Also, if you have watched my culling video, you know that I end up choosing about 200 images or so that I flag red that I put in a slideshow. So as soon as I send that slideshow off to my clients, I also send off all of those sample photos along with all of the culled images from my wedding day off to my editor, and then they have about 200 sample images to base all of my editing on the wedding day off of, which is pretty cool. What used to happen with Plus Minus is I would send them all of the images unedited with my preset attached. They would send me samples, I would approve the samples, and then they would go about editing, and we've sort of cut out that extra step just because I'm including so many samples. I asked Jack if this was actually helpful, and he said that it was, and that a lot of people do end up doing like a sneak peek before they send off the wedding, and it is helpful to see how you envision the editing on that day, so that way they can match it to the style that you're trying to get across. I also feel like it's really beneficial for me to have some time away from my images. Whenever I cull, I try to cull down to like 1,000 before I send it off to be edited. Whenever the editing comes back 2 weeks later, I have forgotten about the aunt that was on the dance floor for 4 hours that I took way too many pictures of because she was having an amazing time. And I'm able to get rid of just a few more images to make sure that I'm only including the best of the best. And I think that having some time and space and distance from those images, it helps me to have less redundancy and to only incorporate my very best work into what's actually being delivered. And I really don't think that I would have that padding if I wasn't outsourcing. So let's talk about the drawbacks. One drawback is that you have to have the editor's timeline padded into your delivery time. So if you know that you want to have a 4-week turnaround, you have to have your wedding culled at least a week and a half after the wedding day. So that way you can wait 10 business days, which is about 2 weeks, for you to get it back and then tweak it or have the extra padding for like re-editing. Especially in the beginning, you want to have extra padding so that way you can re-edit the images or you can give your editors an opportunity to re-edit the images. This padding is really difficult for a lot of people because I know a lot of photographers are procrastinators and they realize that their editing deadline is coming up and then they stay up until 2 a.m. editing because that's that's all that they've allowed time for. So you have to be a little bit disciplined if outsourcing is something you want to do. I also know that I can get a little bit sloppy whenever I'm doing tweaks. If I've been outsourcing, if I am fully editing my own weddings, then I go in and I'm like tweaking things just like little by little. I'm constantly like slightly recropping. I don't always do that because I really like the quick clicks that you can do in the library panel. And so I'm less tempted to like dip into develop to do my cropping. But part of that might be because my editors actually make an attempt to straighten things. We don't always agree on what is straight, but very often they will make an attempt to crop things, which I really appreciate. The expense can be a drawback. This is where you really have to do some math to find out what your hourly rate is. It is not worth giving up a full business day for me to edit a wedding when I could be doing something that's actually earning money, like blogging. Nobody has ever paid me more money because I decided to spend a workday editing their wedding. It doesn't matter who does it because I'm the one that gets the final say in how it looks. So it just seems like it's like a waste of my time, energy, and money to not do it. But it is an expense. And if you don't have the money to put towards outsourcing, then you have to use your time, whatever. It's a trade-off. I also feel like editing your own work really helps provide insight to help you be a better in-camera shooter. There are some things that you might not notice that you have the tendency to do, like maybe you underexpose or overexpose in different situations. And if you have an editor that's sort of like glossing over your errors, you don't really give yourself the chance to improve your technical skills. So that's a thing, but it's worth it to me. And I really can't say that enough. That's basically the entire first half of this video. We know that it saves me time. I know that it's worth the money. It helps me meet deadlines. But I also really love it because sometimes I can't work. I haven't really discussed it on Patreon, but if you follow me, you probably know that I have anxiety and then I suffer from depression and I can't always work. So having that extra time, knowing that I need to have the discipline to cull early and able to buy some of my time back has been really helpful for me. I've been able to take more mental health days. I've gotten to work on personal projects and get to draw more because I have all this extra time. Recently, I was taking care of my dad after surgery and it took more time than I was anticipating and I wasn't able to work at all when I was visiting him. And the end result was that I ended up having to edit like 2 weddings all by myself, which is fine. I still got them done before the 4-week mark and I guarantee my images are ready in 8 weeks. But having that built-in buffer meant that I wasn't stressing out. The longer I sat at my dad's house not working, I was watching my outsourcing buffer disappear, but I knew that I was still going to get the images delivered in time. Having peace of mind to not have that like gut-wrenching feeling of being late. Being late is all my fears. All of my fears in the world are about being late and zombies and like rare diseases and like people not loving me and dying alone. I really hope this was helpful. Hopefully it came across as cohesive. I tried my best to answer all of the questions that came in conversational form instead of like basic Q&A. But if you have Qs, I can totally A them. I don't like I don't like how that was phrased. And I can't really speak to training somebody to edit for you. That's not something that I would ever want to do. I don't want to train a person. This is part of the reason that I'll probably never have interns. I have no interest in training people. I just want to take photos of weddings and shit. I don't want to be a manager. And I have worked with other companies that I didn't mention here, but they weren't meaningful relationships. It wasn't like a long-term thing. We didn't end up working together, so I didn't mention them. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for submitting your questions. Let me know if there's anything else that you want to hear about. Let me know if I didn't answer your questions here because I'm happy to talk more about outsourcing. And thank you so much for watching, strangers. I will talk to you soon. Bye. There's a squirrel outside. He has like a giant nut in his mouth. If I wasn't doing this right now, I would be like outside trying to capture the squirrel and make it love me.